Welcome to this Breakaway Crochet tutorial. This video supplements the joined wagon wheels entry in the Breakaway Motif Library, and I'll be showing you the breakaway crochet techniques that make it possible to crochet all the motifs in this swatch continuously and joined as you go. I will be demonstrating the key breakaway techniques required to make this swatch, such as how to make a floating double treble stitch, how to find chain 2 spaces behind the hook, and my suggested way of slip stitching when joining the wagon wheels. You may also be interested in further information on breakawaycrochet.com, such as the written instructions for this swatch, any currently available projects that use the wagon wheels motif, and further resources covering the Breakaway Crochet Method in general. Please see the description for links. So let's have a closer look at the swatch itself, which is based on a wagon wheel motif. This is a 1 round motif with 12 double trebles or spokes, and each spoke is separated by 2 chains. There are 12 joining points, each happen in each chain 2 space. Although that technically makes this a 12-sided motif, in this swatch we are going to treat this motif as if it was a hexagon, meaning each motif will join twice to each of its neighbors. We will be working this swatch as if it was a back and forth type of stitch. So let's start with the key technique that makes this possible. It's called a floating double treble. And to make one of these, start with 3 yarn overs. And now let's make the floating ring. To do that, make another yarn over and pinch the yarn close to the hook. Make another yarn over and draw this new thread in with what we're already pinching. Just open up a little bit and draw that in. So we've got 2 pinched loops. Let's finish this floating ring with another yarn over and draw through the 2 pinched loops. So these 2 little loops here are the floating ring, and they will be the center of our wagon wheel. All stitches will be worked into this instead of the normal chain 4 slip stitch ring we would normally do. Okay, so that's the floating ring part finished. Let's finish off the double treble part. See, we've got all these loops ready to go on the hook. So just do yarn over, pull through 2, 4 times. And that is our floating double treble finished. So that's the very first stitch of our wagon wheel. This is how we will start every wagon wheel for this whole entire swatch. And so let's start now with the first foundation row of our swatch, which means we are going to start making our motifs at this point, making our first floating double treble and working around, then breaking away and starting and joining 3 more along the row as we go. So let's start our foundation row. Start again with a floating double treble, just like I showed you before, with the 3 yarn overs, floating ring, which is your yarn over, pinch, yarn over, pinch, yarn over, pull through the 2 pinched loops to make the floating ring, yarn over, pull through 2, 4 times, continue with 2 chains and work a double crochet or double treble into the floating ring. So remember, find those center 2 little loops, which are the floating ring, and just work a double treble just like you normally would. Chain 2, another double treble, and just repeat that double treble chain 2 until you have 7 double trebles. Again, chain 2, and this has now reached the breakaway point. We're going to pause work on this wagon wheel and start the next one in the row. So again, that starts with a floating double treble, and something a little bit different now. We need to join the space we are about to make here to the space on the previous wagon wheel. So whenever we do a join, we start the chain 2 space with just the first chain, and now we're going to look for the first chain 2 space behind the hook. And what I mean is, we just go back over what we've just done, and we can see here, this is the first chain 2 space we come to. And that's where we do our special breakaway slip stitch to join the 2 together. So to do that slip stitch, just dip the hook through the space, and when you come back up, we're going to have the yarn and our floating double treble to the left of the hook, and we're going to complete that slip stitch by pulling through like that. So there we've joined our first time. Let's finish the chain 2 space with another chain. Okay, so and now let's do the second double crochet, or second double treble I should say, of our new motif. And once I do that, I'll give you a look at what things should look like. Okay, so here is our floating ring and our new motif, our first one here, and we've joined in that first space. So most motifs will start with that as well, with that first initial join, just like that. So we've got 2 joining points for each little wagon wheel. Alright, so let's carry on with this new wagon wheel, just like we did before, doing double trebles with chain 2 in between until we have 7 double trebles in this motif. So there's our 7th double treble. And before we break away, make sure you do another chain 2. Alright, so we're going to work 2 more wagon wheels just like we've done this second one here. I'll just review this join one more time. So start with the floating double treble. Yeah, let's do our join. Chain 1. Find the first chain 2 space behind the hook. Stip it down, bring it through. The floating double treble and the yarn are to the left of the hook. grab the yarn and pull it through for that slip stitch. Chain 1 and another double treble into our new floating ring, and so on. So there's the first 3. I'm going to go ahead and work one more and meet you at the end of this row. So there's our completed foundation row. And now that it's time for a return row, this is where we're going to finish off the other half of the first 3 motifs or wagon wheels along the row going this way, and just start the beginning of this one. I'll tell you why that needs to only be partially done in just a sec. Alright, so for the return row, we're basically just doing 5 more double trebles with 2 chains in between and closing off the little wagon wheel. So what I mean is, just going to continue around the one we were working on. Again, make sure you've got the chain 2 after the double treble there, and work in our pattern of double treble, chain 2 until we have 5 more double trebles, or there should be 12 all together in the whole motif. So that's the 12th double treble in this current motif. And you see we've got our gap here. And to close that gap, instead of doing chain 2 after the double treble, just do chain 1 and find this little chain 2 space that sits in between the 2 motifs. I'm going to go in there and work a slip stitch. And what that does is it closes off the motif, and it also substitutes as a chain 2 space. Continue with a chain 1, and let's finish off the next little wagon wheel, starting with the double treble, chain 2, just like before. Remember, you're going until you've got 12 double trebles with 2 chains in between. But just remember, after the 12th spoke of the wheel, it's just chain 1, slip stitch in the little chain 2 space between the motifs, chain 1, and let's finish off the 3rd one here. Okay, so that's finished off these 3 at the start of this row, and now it comes time for the first one. We are not going to finish this one off because if you look at the original swatch, this edge over here, look at my book, it widens, okay, and the position of this next motif depends on where we stop on this return row. As you can see, we need 2 joining spaces for that motif and 2 for this one. And to get that to happen, we do the 4 double trebles. So after the 4th double treble on this return row, again we need to do chain 2, and now we're ready to jump up to the next row. And as you can see, we've got 2 joining places for the little motif that will sit here, and 1 plus what this will become a chain 2 space for the motif that will sit on the edge here that widens the piece. Okay, so moving on to a joined foundation row, we are going to be working again the first half of each motif pretty much like we did down here at the bottom, The only difference is we've got a lot more of the joining points as we go. Alright, so we've got the very first one that we did before, but as we come along, we've got 4 more joining points. So I'll go through that with you now. So let's start our joined foundation row, the first wagon wheel, and our first floating double treble. And again, we've got a chain 1 as we're joining. Find the first chain 2 space behind the hook and join up. They slip stitch, chain 1, and continue with another double treble into the floating ring. Now we are actually ready almost to go on to the next wagon wheel, but first we don't have any more joins for this one, so we go ahead with the chain 2, another double treble, chain 2. Now we're ready to break away to the next wagon wheel that will sit right next here in this space here. So floating double treble, chain 1, we've got a join straight away, so go in that first space behind the hook, chain 1, double treble into our new floating ring. And you see sometimes these, it's a little bit strange how this floating stitch is just kind of hanging there, and sometimes it can get twisted, so just check to make sure. You might need to kind of twist it back to the way it's supposed to be. That's alright. It won't unravel or anything, it just might be facing the wrong way, so it's a good idea to check that. Okay, so that's our first join like we've been doing. Let me spread this out a bit. We've joined the first space to that one there. Now we need to join up in these 2 spaces here. So as a kind of a general rule, again, whenever you join, you start with a chain 1, and you're always looking for the first free, I should say, chain 2 space behind the hook. Now this time it's going to look a bit different because we've got all these previous joins already happening. Alright, so I'm going to go behind, and I can see that this space here is the only space that doesn't have a slip stitch into it. So that's the next joining space. So join it, chain 1, and double treble. Chain 1. Let me see, we've got another space here behind the hook, which we need to join into. Double treble. Okay, and we've got 2 more to go here. So chain 1, find the first chain 2 space behind the hook, and we're just looking behind until we get to the one that's not committed to anything else, and go in there with a slip stitch, chain 1, double treble, chain 1. We can see we've joined once, and we've got 2 times here. Our second join, go ahead and do that. Double treble. And kind of as a kind of a formula or rule of thumb, we can see that if we were going to join the next space, it would be going into the same wheel as we did the previous 2 joins. So that means that we're finished joining up to this one for now. That means it's time to move on. So whenever we're going to move on, do the chain 2 and another double treble, chain 2, and you should have 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 double trebles in this joined foundation row here. All right, so we just repeat what we've done for this motif here. We slot that one in there, we slot another one in here, and there will be one on the end which will be slightly different. So I'll meet you when I get to the end. So here we are, ready to put this last one at the end of the row. And it's just a little bit different because it doesn't have as many joining points as the other ones. It only has the one that we kind of start at the beginning and this one, and 2 more here, and then just working the rest of the way around without any joins. And I can also say, as I come up to, I finished the first, well, technically I've got 2 joins there at the beginning, and now I'm joining up these 2 here to the next 2 spaces. Another way to check your work, go ahead and make that next join. As you see how we get little triangles whenever we skip from joining. We were joining to this one, and now we're joining to this one. When we transition, we get that little triangle. That's just another way to check your work. Let's do the second join. And to finish this row off, let's continue this last wagon wheel until we have 7 spokes and the chain 2 spaces in between. There we go, chain 2. So that is the foundation, or sorry, the joined foundation row finished. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 motifs or wagon wheels in this row. And to do the return row, it's just like we did in the beginning, just finishing off. Just make sure you've got 12 double crochet or 12 double trebles in each wagon wheel with chain 1, slip stitch in the little chain 2 space between, chain 1, and finish these off until you get to this last one. And again, it's going to be a little bit different. It's got to be finished off differently because we are narrowing our swatch. There's only 2 joining points to get this next motif to sit here. So we are only going to end with 2 double trebles on the last motif of the row. So I'll go ahead and work that. Got 12 in each of those, finishing with just 2 double treble and chain 2 on the last one. And there's our second foundation row complete. Again, ending with just 2 double trebles in that first motif and chain 2. So again, for the last joined foundation row, we only need 4 more wagon wheels that sort of each one sits in the kind of the crevice here. The first motif starts again the floating double crochet, or sorry, floating double treble crochet. Chain 1, join in the first space right away. Double treble. Let's say we have 2 spaces here in the next motif, so we need to keep going. Chain 1, join, and it's made that little triangle there like I talked about before, so that's all good. Chain 1, double treble, chain 1, and yes, we've got one more join. We've only joined once, so let's go twice in this next little space there. Double treble, and you can see if we were going to check our work, the next joining point would be on the same motif we were joining to before. So we don't want to do that. Again, that's our signal that we're finished joining, and it's time to set up our chain 2, double treble, chain 2, and time to move on to the next wheel. So I won't go through that, just work 3 more that would happen just like we did on this second row here. And I'll meet you at the end. So here is our last joined foundation row done. Those 4 wagon wheels started. Now it's time for a return row, and that again is the same as we've done before, making sure there are 12 spokes in each wheel with the chain, slip stitch, chain in between each one. And when we get back to the first one here, just end with 2 more spokes in the chain 2 between each one. And with our return row finished, we have our last step, which is to finish off the left edge. So you can see how we've left those first ones on each row incomplete. And now it's the time we tie up those loose ends. And basically, we just continue on around the one that we're working on, and really just making sure that each one of these on the edge have all 12 of their spokes. So it's basically a return row, but just checking all of them have 12 spokes, which means, you know, you've got to count, or, well, you can follow the pattern, but really it's easier just to see how many you lack and go ahead and put them in. So this first one, I need 5 more double trebles. So that's that one done. Chain 1, slip stitch, chain 1, and it looks like this next wheel only has 5 double trebles, so let's put 7 more on. Chain 1, slip stitch between, chain 1, and how many do we need? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, just one more. And since that's the very end, we can always check. We're always going to end up right back at the very first stitch. So we found the yarn tail. We know we're ending in the right place. Let's do that. Chain 2 and slip stitch back into that first stitch to finish off the swatch. And there we have it. So I hope that was helpful and gave you a good idea of what's going on with working with these wagon wheels. If you have any questions, please write in. I've got some projects lined up. I hope to have them published soon, so please subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.